Phillips curve. A curve that shows the short-run trade-off between inflation and unemployment. Natural rate hypothesis. The claim that unemployment eventually returns to its normal or natural rate regardless of the rate of inflation. Supply shock. An event that directly alters firms' costs and prices, shifting the economy's aggregate supply curve, and thus the Phillips curve. Sacrifice ratio. The number of percentage points of annual output lost in the process of reducing inflation by 1%. Point. Rational expectations. The theory according to which people optimally use all the information they have, including information about government policies, when forecasting the future. Most economists believe that a trade-off between inflation and unemployment exists only in the short run. According to the long-run Phillips curve, in the long run monetary policy influences the inflation rate but not the unemployment rate. A favorable supply shock causes output to rise. To counter this, a central bank would decrease the money supply. If the minimum wage increased, then at any given rate of inflation, output would be lower and unemployment would be higher. Typical estimates of the sacrifice ratio suggest that a 1 percentage point reduction in the inflation rate requires a sacrifice of 5% of annual output. In response to the financial crisis of 2007, policymakers used expansionary monetary policy and expansionary fiscal policy. Which of the following would we not expect if government policy moved the economy up along a given short run's Phillips curve? Eric gets you our job offers. Suppose that the money supply increases. In the short run, this decreases unemployment according to both the short run's Phillips curve and the aggregate demand and aggregate supply model. Suppose the Fed increased the growth rate of the money supply. Which of the following would be higher in the long run? The inflation rate, but not the natural rate of unemployment. A policy that raised the natural rate of unemployment would shift both the short run and the long run Phillips curves to the right. A politician blames the Federal Reserve for being soft on unemployment and claims that a permanently Higher month supply growth rate will lead to permanent reduction in the unemployment rate. The politician's argument is inconsistent with the long-run Phillips curve. Further, the long-run Phillips curve implies that such a policy would increase inflation. An adverse supply shock will cause output to fall and prices to rise. The natural rate of unemployment does not depend on the rate at which the Fed increases the money supply. If the short-run's Phillips curve were stable, which of the following would be unusual? An increase in inflation and a decrease in output? There is a temporary adverse supply shock. Given the effects of this shock, if the central bank chooses to return unemployment closer to its previous rate, it would raise the rate at which it increases the money supply. In the long run, this will shift the short run Phillips curve right. An adverse supply shock shifts the short run's Phillips curve to the right. This means the unemployment rate is higher at each inflation rate. If the long run's Phillips curve shifts to the right, then for any given rate of money growth and inflation the economy has higher unemployment and lower output. If the central bank increases the money supply in the short run, output rises so unemployment falls. If a central bank decreases the money supply, then prices and output fall and unemployment rises. In 1980, the U.S. economy had an inflation rate of more than 9% and an unemployment of about 7%. A policy change that changes the natural rate of unemployment changes both the long-run's Phillips curve and the long-run aggregate supply curve. Suppose that the money supply decreases in the short run. This increases prices according to neither the short-run Phillips curve nor the aggregate demand and aggregate supply model.